Okay, I'm sitting here today live. This is the first time I've used a YouTube streaming service. This will go up, well, when you see it, it will be live up on YouTube. And after hearing from a number of people about the first interview I did with Seth Pogue, uh, we discussed a couple things. And he's back here today, and we're doing a video aspect. In the future, we're talking about doing a live Q&A where people can actually come in and ask questions, and we'll have a back and forth there as well. And again, Seth, could you introduce yourself for people who might not have heard the first interview? And again, thank you for being here today.
Hey man, thanks for having me. My name's Seth Pogue, Marine Corps veteran, infantry 0351, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, Semper Fi, Retreat Hell. Thanks for having me here today.
And it's great to talk to you again. Definitely glad we could do this again quickly. And we spoke about a lot the first interview, and I did have several requests about topics that you even wanted to hear you go into further about. And one of those were when we spoke about the ag laws. A couple of individuals wanted to hear more about them in detail. Could you explain what they are and the problem you see with them across the country?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'll go through which states have actual ag laws currently. Iowa has one, Missouri has one, North Carolina has one, and Utah has one. Idaho had one, but that was the state that struck it down as unconstitutional, as violation of the First Amendment. Utah's is currently being challenged. It's being reviewed by U.S. District Judge Robert Shelley. And he has yet to make a decision. So again, a reiteration of ag laws. It makes it unconstitutional to speak out against wrongs in the workplace. And the newer ones, Missouri in particular, I believe, or is it North Carolina? It might be North Carolina. It's North Carolina, actually. Their ag law, the more recent ag laws, aren't only limited to agriculture business. There's a lot of fear that that these will actually affect. Let's see, what are they? Healthcare locations. I actually have one of the articles pulled up. Let's see. My computer's being slow here. Okay, here it is. I'm quoting from Dominguez. Try and get a full name here. Matthew Dominguez of the Humane Society of the United States. He says it's a very broad and dangerous ag bill because it doesn't just affect agriculture. It affects nursing homes, daycares, veteran facilities, anywhere you have people that are vulnerable. This law prohibits employees from recording in non-public areas of their workplace. Critics say it implies that releasing any footage to the public would be a violation of what the legislation is calling an employee's duty of loyalty to their employer, which is just disgusting in of itself. Whistleblowers could be fined up to $5,000 per day. It also singles out data and document theft, planting surveillance equipment, and organized retail theft. It's being called one of the wolf in sheep's clothing bills. Um, so yeah, these bills are directly violating our right to free speech. I mean, these workers are saying, factory farm workers and factory farm owners in general, are worried that when video comes out that shows castration methods or detailing methods, which are, the industry standard, um, that those type of videos, when they're released, they do damage to their farms and et cetera and et cetera. But the simple fact is, like, a lot of Americans are completely out of touch, like, where our food comes from and how our food sources are being kept. These factory farms are so large that they have to dig massive pits for feces. And like I said before, there's actual footage of these animals being kept in pens that have nowhere to move simply because they're so packed in the pens and they have nowhere to defecate. So all of their feces is just stacking up, stacking up, stacking up, getting all over the meat. Um, it turns into a really large problem, especially when rains come in. Then you have those huge pits filled with feces flooding over. That gets on crops. That's how spinach caused E. coli years back. It's because of these farms. That's how peanut butter got Americans sick and died because of these factory farms. Like, this material, we have to be smart about it. I mean, we're going back to the great stink, or the big stink of London, way back when people were just throwing their fecal matter like out the windows all over the street. Um, and then a sickness started breaking out, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he's one of the he started investigative reporting, I guess you would call it, where he started going to zones that were affected by the sickness. And in that time, everyone thought it was an airborne thing, but he was convinced it was the water they were drinking. He noticed that the people who got sick were located right around the water wells, and certain water wells, like, people were getting sick. So he went to those water wells, and he found that there was fecal matter and urine like all over the place, and it got into the water, and people were drinking it, and that caused the sickness. And so, like, a revolutionary, thought process, and yet we're doing it now with factory farms and doing it on commercial grade, like, huge scale production. And I actually have another article here talking about, again, North Carolina. Because of this waste buildup, it's actually leaked into the water. They've done tests on the water supply and found E. coli and other disgusting things in our water supply, simply because of how we're keeping. Yeah, here it is right here. Um, for a year, they tested waters both up and downstream from factory pig farms and found that both samples contained high amounts of fecal matter, some in excess of state and federal recreational water quality guidelines for fecal coliforms, E. coli, and Enterococcus. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of problems with these. These are actually prohibiting us from being able to speak out and blow the whistle on factories. And now, with these bills becoming more and more broad, they're not tying it to agriculture anymore, which means when, let's say, a bank or a water corporation or oil corporation is doing something wrong and someone goes to blow the whistle on them, well, that's going to be covered by a future gag law, which means you're not allowed to say that, and they can literally fine you every single day, which, I mean, I don't know how else to put that besides that is a huge, dangerous game being pushed on us by legislation, which is from our government. Like,
And
very
that's,
unconstitutional here.
yeah, that's alarming because I live in North Carolina currently, and from living here, you can definitely smell pig farms. There's dozens of pig farms in North Carolina, and there have been issues with them for a while when it comes to the smell and the running of and how they for how they treat animals, the conditions animals are kept in, and the runoff of their waste. It's been a very large issue here, and hearing about that now these laws are in place that basically want to even say that, oh, you can't speak out against it because you owe your place of work a certain loyalty isn't really how it's supposed to work. People are supposed to have the power over all acts of business. Without them, you don't have consumers. Without workers, you don't. Your work doesn't get done. So that's a little backwards way of looking at it. And I get this law and others are kind of why international sources that review democracies have basically labeled North Carolina as no longer even being a democratic state within the United States of America. And which is unfortunate to think about. All the news coming out of North Carolina over the past 6, 8 months has been rather negative when it comes to civil liberties and what you have the right to do within the state. And where these kind of laws are actually starting to take over and go into banking industries or any kind of other industry where just any industry where someone sees like this is directly wrong and it could harm a lot of people. I mean, I guess an extreme example would be what if this is an airplane manufacturing facility where they're making 747s and we're like, oh, we're doing something really bad here that could actually end up causing this plane to crash. If that employee basically says and blows a whistle on that or records something, and instead of being rewarded, they would actually be legally fined by the state they live in, and they would have to go through years and years and years of challenges to go up to the Supreme Court. And it's just basically the fears you're basically are putting forward, saying like this is why we need to do something about these laws and show that this is a direct violation of the First Amendment.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the ag law is already like, I mean, you know, no one wants to lose their job, but that is a really big fear when you're seeing something that you believe to be wrong, and just knowing that there's actual legislation in your state that says, you know, your loyalty is to your company. Like, who is the government to tell you what your loyalty is to? Like, we're supposed to be reporting what's wrong. We're supposed to be seeking knowledge, seeking truth. Like, that's a very dangerous game. PETA has put out statements saying that people come from other states, even states that don't have ag laws, just because they're terrified, you know, their employers are going to punish them for speaking out. And like, in this country, we, especially our government and media, they keep trying to push like, you know, punish people like Julian Assange or Edward Snowden or any of these whistleblowers who come out and, you know, like, we get all this information that our government is spying on us, our government is tied up into all sorts of like horrible things. And of course that government is going to try to say like they're enemies, like they're the ones that we're shining the spotlight on, but like it shouldn't be any secret to anyone. Like, I mean, when a government politician is saying something to you like we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we'll end the war, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. But if you actually look at their campaigns, the majority of them fail to uphold most of their promises. And even the slight good that they do during their administrations, they're usually greatly outweighed by the negatives that come to fruition.
That
Today
actually,
on Facebook, I saw some people, posting, pictures of the Obama family and being like really sad that we're losing this president. And like, yeah, he did some good, but he also did a shitload of bad. And it's weird to see this like cycle. Like Americans are caught in this cycle that like, oh, he made all these promises, he's going to do them. He's not fulfilling the promises at all. He's actually, not that trustworthy. Okay, we hate this guy. He's horrible. Oh, there's a new politician coming into the arena. He's saying something so awesome. Oh, he's going to fulfill. Oh, he's not doing it. Blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't matter, like, which two parties, like, you're going with. Like, both of the parties do it. Both of the parties push out legislation that takes away more freedoms, takes away more rights, and they do some very sneaky things, passing laws in the middle of the night, and like we the people are having to put out like possible laws to get our government to actually read laws before they sign them, or actually have to put out notifications like 72 hours in advance before they sign any type of law. Um, and I mean that in of itself doesn't solve anything because of all the legal jargon that they hide, like their true intentions in. Um, so I don't know, man. Like it's definitely worrisome, and like I mean, I've been watching these ag gag laws come out since the very beginning and saying the same thing, like these are unconstitutional, like what the heck, they're completely violating our freedom of speech, our freedom of the press. And then you see that further on down the road with actual protests, with reporters being arrested and reporters getting shot on camera and like all types of things. Like that's the point of the press. The point is another check of and balance of our government, of our corporations. They're supposed to be shedding the light on these horrible things, but most of our media are owned by six large corporations who are interested in nothing but money and interested in nothing but selling their message and getting their goals across. Regardless if that means getting us into a war and seeing Americans die and killing millions, thousands, pick a number, overseas. And since 9/11, we have killed millions. That's it's crazy. And then to know that police have killed more Americans stateside since 9/11 than us being in war. Like there are some huge problems here that, like, I mean, and another thing I really hate is when you go to speak out against police actions, like people try to label you as a cop hater, or like you don't deserve their protection. Like, I have family members and I have friends who are police officers, okay? um I was in the military. I understand how stressful it can be. In a cop, it can be very stressful. Some people are messed up in the head and literally do kill cops simply to avoid speeding tickets or to avoid having their car searched or anything else. Like, you know, it is a very stressful job, but to think that means we shouldn't be holding them accountable to the same laws that they're trying to enforce. Um, I mean, a lot of people think that cops have the right to, or have the duty, the obligation to defend us, the American people, and that's completely false. The Supreme Court even ruled that a cop has no constitutional obligation to defend you at all, even with a court-ordered, court-issued protective order. He still doesn't have to defend you, which, in my mind, completely violates the point of a protection order. Like, so what is the point of police then? Oh, well, the point of police is to push the government's agenda and to protect corporations like we're seeing in Standing Rock. That's what those cops are doing. They're not protecting the people there. They're protecting the corporation. They're protecting their profits. Like, they're firing on Americans. They're violating Americans' freedoms and rights. Like, none of that is right. None of that is correct.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great things there. We're going to move into the police in just a moment. And when you went into directly the ag logs and individuals like Julian Assange being directly, he was actually Julian Assange and Edward Snowden were directly, we'll say, threatened by Hillary Clinton before, while she was running for president, it's saying she wants them both in jail. And also that immediately reminds me of Chelsea Manning, who is in prison now, who
Yep.
recently sadly tried to commit suicide, and she went to prison because of her saying, I witnessed a helicopter shooting civilians, doctors at a hospital, and she ends up in jail, but no one that was following those orders, which are unlawful, have been prosecuted or brought forth at all. And that's unfortunate because I've heard from many Americans, friends of mine, people I've known for years, who say that I don't understand why people in these countries hate us. Well, and I try to go and explain, it's not that they intrinsically hate Americans, is that they see American weapons, they can see American bombs on the ground and that killed their family, that they actually weren't terrorists. You're actually creating terrorists if you're just going to go around shooting the doctors who were helping these individuals. And seeing stuff like that it's frustrating because United States could use the military and be seen as peacekeepers that are there to help the populace, but in cases like indiscriminate drone attacks and targeting individuals that have nothing to do with terrorists, yeah, you're going to make the populace upset and angry at just the idea of the United States. Like, why are you doing this? We didn't do anything wrong. And that's something I think is very important for listeners to understand. Like,
yeah,
that's exactly like Chelsea Manning. Like, that's the direct example of how that happens. And there's no way that she should be in prison for basically being a whistleblower.
Yeah. I mean, you're completely right. There are plenty of people who have been prosecuted for speaking out and doing the right thing. I mean, again, that's supposed to be the point of the media, and like that's one of the like great things I loved about like being in Standing Rock is, you know, meeting you and meeting like other independent reporters out there who were willing to stick it through the blizzard and, you know, go through tough times in order to actually show what is going on. And again, there's supposed to be a check and balance. They're supposed to check the government. They're supposed to expose lies. They're not supposed to help them hide lies. They're not supposed to push out their own lies. They're not supposed to twist the facts. But that's what they do. I mean, they're owned by these corporations, just like our government. Like our government is being run by these corporations and banks, which is why there is a huge push to try to get that money out of politics. But then we'll just say individuals can donate however much you want. Okay, well, individuals are in those corporations, so they donate X amount of dollars and have those individuals do it. Like, so it seems like, and then the whole revolving door, like, of, you know, people who are in our government and go back into these corporations and then come back into government and vote on legislation that affects those corporations that they're working for and getting paid by. Like, all of these things are horrible things. These things are like, you're setting the groundwork for corruption. Like, that's all that is. And I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's some. You're touching on a lot of great things, and especially at Standing Rock when you brought up the police officers who, and I was an only journalist at the time that was standing across from Turtle Hill, and I witnessed over a dozen Humvees moving over an hour and a half the day after the Army Corps of Engineers stated that the Energy Transfer Partners does not have the vertical drilling permits. And they moved in dozens of Humvees, dozens of snowmobiles, and several other snowmobiles during that time. For what purpose? As a show of force? Like, the only thing I could think of, like, this is a show of force, and I'm confused as to why. I couldn't determine if those were police officers or hired. I almost said mercenaries, but security force. It's not called mercenaries. That's a little inflammatory. And it was a little difficult to understand. Like, why are you doing? Like, there has been, despite, and one of the next article I'm actually working on is going into the lies coming from individuals in the North Dakota government who have been spewing lies, and from the Morton County Sheriff, basically saying that no, these water protectors are actually violent protesters who are burning things and harming police officers. And Morton County's YouTube decided to release a video of, like, these protesters are throwing snowballs at us.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I was like there's videos of people there's a video of a journalist being shot. Sophia, I cannot remember how to pronounce her last name.
Yeah, I can't. I can never remember her last name either.
Well, Sophia Wolanski, her arm is still in danger of having to be severed because of a concussion grenade being thrown on not only American citizens but human beings who are not armed. Like, and you're worried about snowballs that you cannot prove were thrown or not thrown, and people are actually believing this, and that's why it extends even further to that. As you said, individuals like, oh, you either are a cop hater or you think the cops can't do anything wrong. And that to me is so frustrating. It's like, I'll be the first one to say, most cops are not bad. People are like showing, like, using the examples of a few bad apples when every single example comes up. But you have to think of, there's millions upon millions of cops who aren't doing those things every day. So no, not all. So yeah, it actually is a few bad apples. Those few bad apples out of the percentage just affect a lot of people. And that's something important to remember, because I've had interactions. I've had a couple of interactions with police officers. One was a little annoying and probably over the top, but it wasn't anything violent. That did speak to me. It was still frustrating. No guns were pulled or anything like that. I wasn't pepper spray beaten, nothing like that. It was just a little grating. But again, like, they handled it reasonably well. And there's other cases of that. But the individuals who want to say that a cop can never do anything wrong, despite looking at video, I've seen this. Talk to people that says, well, yeah, the cop just choked that guy out and they're beating him, but I want to see the entire video. And this is like, if you read police protocol, when someone is detained and someone is unable to do you any harm, you're supposed to stop using force. Period. Like, there's actually no reason to see any rest of the video. There's no law at this point in time that says you have to be nice to police officers, that you have to talk to them a certain way. You can't show frustration at them. You just can't be violent towards them. So like just seeing those two sides of the conversation is like, why can't we come together and have a conversation? Because the FBI data shows that yes, we are seeing minorities at a higher percentage of of their population being attacked and beaten than white individuals. But in greater numbers, because there's a lot more white Americans, they're being also attacked. So it's not even really an ethnic or racial thing. It's just the way
Yeah,
police are acting. And it's just, we can do something about that without basically saying all police officers are crap or all police officers are saints. And that's one of the most frustrating things about the conversation in the general public. And you have family members who are officers. Like, how do they, when talking to you, how do they directly approach that? And what do they think about the conversation around police brutality and ethics within police departments?
Well, I actually have a friend I came across on Facebook, a retired police officer, and he said he's actually, in his career, actually arrested fellow officers when they're exceeding the line. And I told him right there and then that's what we need. We need officers to begin policing their own, because otherwise you're going to leave it up to the citizens. And, like, the normal citizen uh, has no training, no military training, no police training. They have no stress training. So when you're in a stressful situation, as in someone has a gun on you and you have a gun on them, and it's kill them before they kill you, that gets your blood pumping. And you can train and train and train, but training doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be good to go. The same cop, we were actually discussing things on Facebook about Standing Rock before I ended up going out there, and I was saying something about cops, and the normal trolls hopped on there and said I was a cop hater, and I put them back to bed by saying, no, I have, friends and family members who are cops and who do know the law and do understand that Americans have constitutional rights. And just as you said, there are only a few of these people, a relative few, in light of how many officers there are nationwide, who are doing this. But the more times our courts are ruling that, I know that the video showed and all of the eyewitnesses showed that this police officer overstepped his bounds, but we're not going to charge him. Or even if they do charge him and a lawsuit happens, there's nothing to prevent that officer from then joining another precinct. I followed an investigative report on one officer that followed one officer, and he in his first station, he beat the shit out of someone and then got charged for it. Caused the precinct to lose a bunch of money. Then he retired, and then he got hired at another precinct. Did the exact same thing. Beat the shit out of someone, caused them to fork over a bunch of money, went over to another precinct, and this one was in a small town, and beat the shit out of someone. The precinct, after they had to pay the lawsuit, they actually had to shut down. Like, that small town has no police station anymore because this one guy was not held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. When, like, if any of us had done that, like, you try to show me that a court won't, like, try to rule on the hardest, give us the biggest judgment against that. Especially when corporations are pretty much, using prisoners as slave labor in this country. And making all types of things for, cents on the dollar. So like there's too much corruption, there's too much wrong in this nation, in our policies, to not start acting as individuals. Like we can't rely on our government, who's full of politicians which are liars, to try to fix these things. Like even if someone in politics wants to fix something, they have to talk to this person and this person and this person and get funding and blah 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 blah. Well, let's use Flint, Michigan, for example. Okay, they have lead in their water. What causes that? The pipes in the ground. The pipes have lead in them. Okay, so the simple solution is to replace the pipes. That hasn't been done. Like, we need to stop looking to the government and these corporations to, come save us. Like, I know some plumbing. I know plenty of people who are plumbers. I know carpenters. I know electricians. Like, why are we waiting for them to do this? We have the supplies. We're making the goods. We're doing everything. So cut out the top man for the whole profit thing. We have the facilities, we have the resources, we have everything. We need to start doing this for ourselves and start taking care of ourselves.
And
Like that was like one of the big ideas that was at Standing Rock, was like, we are the people. And if we want things to change, we need to make them happen. We can't rely on this stuff anymore. Like every time you look at the news, there's another report of a company or a bank or the government screwing us over some way. Like, enough of that.
what you bring up there is definitely important, especially when you look at exactly what Governor Rick Snyder of Michigan has refused to do when it comes to Flint, Michigan, and wanting to replace what's the same thing is happening in East Chicago and Indiana. The governors are just basically looking at it as like, I don't care. Those people are from an area that doesn't even vote for me. So what difference does it make to me? And that's basically what's coming down to. It's extremely difficult to get these things done in government right now due to the vast majority, probably 80% of people, those individuals in Congress right now, have ties to multinational corporations who donate them a lot of money, or they have ties to lobbyist groups that demand certain things. Like, no, if you do anything as far as that, you get no more funding. We'll just fund your opponent. And there's very few. I can, again, like Bernie Sanders, Liz Warren, Tulsi Gabbard, Keith Ellison. There's not. They can basically stop there. Unfortunately, right now, politics on the top of my head, and that's only 4. What are they? They can't really do it all by themselves. They can try, but that's where the power of the people does come in. You have to start doing research on voting for individuals, because if you change everyone in Congress to represent what you want and feel, then you can get action. But there's also examples of people, like you mentioned. There's nothing stopping individuals from either self-funding or getting by an organization that will go replace those pipes themselves, and try to help those in Flint. You might run into, well, actually, at this point in time, I highly doubt you'll hear anything from Rick Snyder. It's like, wait, you actually don't have the permits to change it. Wait, I don't think you're going to hear that. That would be more than political suicide for them right now. So when you're in that kind of situation, people have the power to do these things, and they can. And I'm not sure. I've spoken to a lot, hundreds of people, especially at when I was at Standing Rock. And again, as every time I bring that up, if anyone has just a little inkling of desire to go there, do so, because you'll see things differently. Things are not done as you expect them to. It's not saying that it's not even really about being minimalist or anything like that. I mean, they still, the culture there, the indigenous people, they still use technology and all these things, and like those things. It's just how you treat each other and treat the environment, how race, religion, age, none of this stuff really matters at all. And then you see what they're dealing with. Like I can still remember just looking across at all basically looking like a small convoy that you would think in Iraq. Was like, those people are armed and want and probably wouldn't mind destroying this entire camp. But when you walk inside camp and you're hearing what people are talking about, they're not even, there's no desire to be violent or do harm to those individuals over there are wanting to drill this pipeline that have shot numerous people that I spoke to in camp with rubber bullets or sprayed them with mace or sprayed them with water hose that could cause hypothermia. It's really an amazing thing to see that I don't feel a lot of Americans quite understand what's going on, because being there with the helicopter, basically anytime I wanted to pull out a camera or look across the ridge, helicopter would come, want to say hi. I even waved at it once. I was like, I know you're probably using face scanning technologies, seeing who I am, and like, I don't really care.
Yeah.
And stuff like this, like you feel like you're a prisoner in a foreign land, but it's the United States of America, and you're seeing American citizens being treated that way, and it is just something that it shouldn't be happening. And there's, again, the police that are there, who are still there. I'm not sure what is going through their minds. None of them have come forward. I can't even get Morton County on the phone. The sheriff's department of Morton County on the phone to speak to me. But I just want to know what these officers are thinking, and why do you honestly, in your heart of hearts, feel, I'll even do it on deep background, one wants to talk to me if they actually hear this, but what do you really think these border protectors are dangerous and violent? And there hasn't been any evidence of that, but there's been
Yeah.
kind of evidence.
Yeah, I mean, you were bringing up how when you're talking to the people in camp, there's no desire to cause harm, and that's completely true. I mean, in fact, like, we're praying that they understand these basic truths. I mean, regardless on which side you stand, you need water to survive. Water is necessary for life. I mean, what does NASA do when we're looking at other planets, potential like places for life? We check for water. There's water not there, then there's no need to check it. So why would we be intentionally continuing fossil fuels? And it's not even just fossil fuels, it's more of fracking and fossil fuels. These oil leaks from the pipelines cause a lot of damage, but fracking in of itself is insane. I mean, we are literally asking to poison our own water supply with the process. I mean, you're pumping hundreds, like over 500 chemicals into this mixture that you're pumping into the earth to break up rocks, and then it has sand and water to push the sand there and keep the rocks separated, and then you suck all the chemicals out, and then you're able to collect the natural gas. Well, part of that process, you also at the end pump all the chemicals back in and seal the hole. So let's get this straight. We're using chemicals that dissolve minerals, that break apart the earth. And every fracking site, when they're done, puts the chemicals back in and seals the hole. So we know just through geological movements and how what we figured out thus far that these chemicals are dissolving their way to our water supply. Now, in Standing Rock, there's a strong belief that when we're talking about, protect the water, that we're only speaking about the river that, they're trying to put the pipeline through. And that's not exactly correct. That is a very big issue, but the bigger issue is the Oglala Aquifer, which is right next to where they're fracking to get to the Balkan oil fields, which is out there, which is what we're pulling out and we're shipping across the ocean. It's not staying here. We're shipping across the ocean for profit. So it's not a utility pipeline. It's not being utilized here at all. It is strictly for transport and sale, as we've covered before. So it blows my mind that people, have all these different beliefs and, believe they'll stand for this or they're stand for this. Well, the thing is, none of us are going to be able to stand for anything without water. The Oglala Aquifer, you need to do research on it. I think it's the biggest or one of the biggest aquifers in the U.S. I believe it's the biggest. And it's one of the biggest in the world. All of America's fresh water comes from this area. So when these fracking chemicals, whether it happens now or down the road, when they get into the Oglala Aquifer, all of our fresh water is going to get poisoned. Now, water affected by fracking, you can't boil it out. You can't purify it. Even going through a water treatment plant, they can't get the chemicals out of it. So that water completely becomes useless. All the farms out there are getting their water from the Oglala Aquifer. Drinking water is coming from the Oglala Aquifer. You're not going to be able to bathe with this water. It can cause chemical burns. It can give you cancer. It's horrible. Horrible process that we're doing strictly for profit. And we know the consequences of it. We're seeing them actively. We're seeing little ponds, excuse me, little ponds that you can literally light on fire because of the fracking chemicals that are coming up into these little lakes. There are videos of this. Like, this needs to strike home. People need to realize, like, if we want change, we're going to have to be the change. We can't wait for a corporation. We can't wait for a government. In fact, I would love to read the section of the Declaration of Independence here that's considering that water is life. All of us need water to survive. And this is the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not saying those are the only ones, but among those are the big ones, okay? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So they get all of their power from us, we put them in charge, and they need our consent to maintain their power. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, that's the Declaration of Independence. It's very clear right there. If a government is threatening your life through food, through air, through water, through any of that, like, it is our right. The same people who put them in charge, the same people who give them our consent to continue to rule us. It is our right to say no more. You're either, if you're in politics, you're either going to agree with the people who put you there or you're out. In fact, you could even charge them with treason in some cases, in plenty of cases. Like, if they are not fulfilling their obligation to the people, to the Constitution, then it's treason. I mean, that's the literal definition of treason. If you're going against your country, your people. So yeah, it's and I came across a Facebook friend who actually worked for an oil company and pipeline, and he confirmed what I'm saying about fracking. I actually asked him if I could quote him, and like showed him a little 5-minute video I found of fracking, and he watched the video, and I asked him, I was like, is this a good representation of what you're talking about? And he said yes. So exactly. So like this is a problem.
And that's where, and that's, I think this is where what we're talking about now is where there's a lot of conflict between voters of different levels of being informed and also their levels of knowing what they can and cannot do. Because, for example, I heard this quite a lot from during actually the Democratic primary from Hillary Clinton that she only wanted to support safe fracking. And there's literally no such thing as safe fracking, but millions of her diehard supporters believe that there is such a thing as safe fracking because she said so, and they don't do that additional research. And because even with everything you mentioned, fracking can also cause geological earthquakes in areas that you would not expect them because you're literally drilling a
I
hole.
did not even mention that. Another huge problem.
And you're disrupting the core of the earth, and basically, yeah, you could cause an earthquake in the middle of Nebraska, for example. Then that should never happen. So there's no such thing as safe fracking, and that's one of the biggest things during the Democrat primary, where I still remember I was actually covering the debate. The question of fracking was brought up. Hillary Clinton goes into saying, well, I only want to push safe fracking, blah, 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 blah. Gives like a minute and a half answer on it. And they asked Bernie Sanders, will you ever support fracking in any circumstance? No. Done. and it's like that's kind of what it comes down to. If you really care about the environment, you need to realize that fracking is a disaster. Going off on a little tangent there, all this money being spent into fracking, there is literally, even if you're just a businessman who does not care, or a businesswoman who doesn't care about anything else other than making a profit, there is so much more money in renewable energy right now that if companies were starting to invest in that and divest from fossil fuels, someone is going to make tens of billions of dollars. Like, I wish I had just like 50 grand, like, here, renewable energy, come on, this is going to make me lots of money. This is going to like be worth $500,000 in like 10 years. And because there's so much money there to make, and it's renewable, which means it's going to last forever. And any companies that have access to that will be making billions, but they don't think, like, for some reason, they're thinking on the short term and don't care what happens, even if they destroy the planet, to do stuff like that. But we're back on track of what we're talking about. It's people do understand these rights, and some people just don't understand what the power of the vote has, and what power they have. Because, for example, you can look at the past couple hundred years. It's been not framed in this form, but there's been anti-federalist or federalist debates going on for literally hundreds of years, in one way or the other. And they're basically just arguing how much power, how much consent do we give certain entities. That's basically what the big argument comes down to. But individuals don't realize that, and still so many Americans don't vote, is that if you actually don't like what your government is doing, in some cases gerrymandering is ridiculous, but that's a different topic. But at a more of like a governor level, sometimes state legislature level, and especially at the federal level, you can vote and get these people out. But we have, again, because of the money in politics, there's so much. If you're in office, you're getting reelected. I believe the rate is like 70-something% of all offices, and that's a problem, because when you look at people looking at when they're asked about what you feel about this body, they say it's overwhelmingly we can't stand it, but you're still voting back for these same people because you recognize your names, or you got tricked. Because, I mean, I'll take a little jab at both sides. On the left, you just believe that, oh, this person is in my has my best interest because they, let's just say they support Planned Parenthood, which almost every single individual on the left does. And then they stopped looking at that. It was like, wait a minute, I can find you like 7,000 Democrats that support Planned Parenthood, but you're ignoring that they're pro big corporations. They're they're against any regulations being put on these corporations. They don't really support small businesses. They want to give subsidies to oil companies that don't need them. Then on the right, you're like, okay, this politician says they're all about the Bible and they want to secure American heritage, which is basically code words for white heritage. And you vote based on that, even when on the right, you're again seeing these neoliberal principles basically saying we support big corporations. We don't really care about you on your farm in rural Kansas. Like, no, we don't care. We're not going to give you any subsidies. We're going to give them to these big corporations. And we don't care about trying to put together a multi-pronged minimum wage that helps those working for big corporations make a certain amount of money, but also doesn't cause small businesses to have to, go into large debt. But again, you could also, politicians, they're not stupid. They are aware of these things. You could also put subsidies into small businesses so they can actually pay the minimum wage. There's many different ways to look at it and think
Yeah,
about
I
it.
mean,
But
our
people don't.
government gives those subsidies to those big corporations, and then yet they mismanage their funds or do other sorts of things, and then they're about to fail, and then we have to bail them out. And so we're having to bail them out, and then more legislation is passed where our benefits are taken away more and more. Like, people need to understand that this version of capitalism that we're in, it's
Predatory.
solely for corporations. It's not benefiting. Like, most of the world is capitalist, or I think it was like 90% of the world is capitalist. Most of the third world countries that are completely poverty stricken, capitalist. Like, how's that possible if it's such a great thing? It's because we have to get all of these supplies from somewhere, and they want to keep their overheads low and want to charge exorbitant you know fees for their services and call them salaries. And this isn't just on for-profit corporations. There are plenty of non-profit corporations that do this kind of thing and do horrible types of use of funds. Like, legally, a nonprofit only has to spend, I think it's 10% of like the donated or raised funds on the actual thing that they're trying to raise funds for. That means, legally speaking, they can take the 90% and just put that in salary and pay bills and whatever. And you see, like, across the board on corporations, like, who are claiming they don't have enough money to, take care of their workers, the workers who are providing them the means to make all of this money. They don't have money to provide them any, but they have enough to give them, $100 million salaries, like, easy. Like, that's it's greed. I mean, greed literally is the root of all evil. And I mean, I kind of want to transition into money simply because I'm talking about greed, if that's all right.
Oh yeah. Before we do that, I just want to make one point for those listening. When he says that most of the world is capitalist, he's basically saying that most countries in the world have a form of capitalism in their economy, which is true. Even in the United States, we have a mixed economy. That's when it does get a little frustrating when individuals say we don't want to be socialist when Social Security is a social program, the military itself is a social program. So there's these big things like that. I'm just going to get that clear.
Yes.
Basically saying that most countries have a form of capitalism within their economy. Yeah, we can go ahead and transition in and do that.
Okay. So the whole thing about money, I brought this up briefly in the last interview, I believe. I said the Federal Reserve, it's a privately owned central bank. The American people, the American government, the U.S. Treasury, we do not own our own money. And the danger in doing that is our government has to, let's say the U.S. government wants to put $1 billion into the economy, okay? So in order to do that, they print out 1 billion notes. They give those billion notes to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve prints out $1 billion bills. Okay, but instead of just handing the $1 billion over fair trade, they attach interest to it. Now, if money, the only legal tender recognized money is the US dollar, and they're the ones that give that to us with interest attached, that automatically means you're never going to be able to pay off your national debt, because a government is getting money to put into its own economy. The whole purpose of money is just to assist with trade and services. If you print more money than what is needed, then you cause inflation and therefore devaluation of your currency. So they give us $1 billion bills, and let's say they attach, this would be a killer interest plan, but 10,000 or 10 million, okay? 10 million in interest, 10,000 in interest, whatever have you. If we pull out 10,000 of the billion that we just got, then our economy is going to be shorted by $10,000. So what that means is our government has to then print 10,000 bills and ask for 10,000, or 10,000 notes and ask for 10,000 bills. And they'll attach more interest to that. And so it's a ever circulating pattern. So when politicians begin to talk about the national debt and like, starting these industries will help the national debt, that's completely false. It's propaganda. Our money is based on debt currently. If you actually follow the history of central banks in the U.S., the Federal Reserve is the third attempt on it. The first and second were overcome by the government and overcome by the people of the U.S. Central bank, they claim their whole purpose is to, stabilize a nation's economy. But that's the exact opposite of what they do. When the Federal Reserve was put into place by President Woodrow Wilson, who later, I have a quote from him saying how much he regretted that decision. Because again, you know what? I'm just going to read you some of the quotes here. Here we go. Here's Woodrow Wilson, who signed the 1913 Federal Reserve Act. Right after the Federal Reserve Act, now again, the central bank is supposed to stabilize a nation's economy. After the Federal Reserve came into effect in 1913, what happened? We had the Roaring Twenties and the Great Depression. So that's the opposite of stabilization. Woodrow Wilson, he writes, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all of our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled and one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men."
Yeah, that's definitely.
Thomas Jefferson, he has a couple of quotes talking about the banks. He says the modern theory of the perpetuation of debt has drenched the earth with blood and crushed its inhabitants under burdens ever accumulating. National debt. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. He also goes into a little bit here. This is Thomas Jefferson in the debate over the recharter of the bank bill in 1809. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation and then deflation, the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people, to whom it properly belongs. James Madison, he says, history records that the money changers, banks, have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. Andrew Jackson, which is the president um, who led the killing of the second bank of the U.S., which was an earlier type of a central bank, the Federal Reserve. He says if Congress has the right under the Constitution to issue paper money, it was given to use themselves, not to be delegated to individuals or corporations. Like, if you actually get into the history of just a lot of different American history, pick a topic and go into history about it, you'll find that our whole idea that whole history has been lost in our history books. You actually have to go research yourself and find out about these people and find out about these acts. And thankfully, there are people all over the world who are, doing that research. So it's up to us as individuals to be able to not only just listen to them, because you don't want to, just be taking advice and information from one person. You want to go verify it yourself. You want to get multiple sources on it. So I challenge you to do that. Like, start looking into these problems. I've talked to people on Facebook who try to say banks aren't in control of you unless if you're in debt. That's completely false. Again, our entire money system is based on debt. So if you have money, it's based on debt. There are laws that say if a bank is about to fail, they can legally take your money to keep themselves from failing. And it's happened before in the past. So we do not own that money. But here's the thing, the president, our government, they have the power to make any bill legal and tender, meaning they also have the power to instantly kill the US dollar. We also have the power to take control of the Federal Reserve and actually put it into the hands of the people. We have a lot of different means possible. If you look at the beginning of this country, we had before the Revolutionary War, Benjamin Franklin, in his diary, you can read about it. He's in a party in Paris, and people ask him, because the rest of the world is having a depression, and people are asking him, like, how are the American colonies doing so great when their mother country, Great Britain, is having all these debt issues? And he says, oh, that's simple. In the colonies, we print our own money. We call it colonial script, and we only print as much as needed, and we do not charge interest. So right after that, that's when Great Britain starts bringing the hammer down on the colonies, starts charging more taxes and etc. But eventually they rule that we can no longer print our own money, that we have to use Britain's money. And what that does is exactly what Thomas Jefferson was talking about. Instantly, the colonies changed. And you can read about this in Benjamin Franklin's diary. He goes into great detail about it. How Americans became homeless, Americans became jobless. And he even goes further on talking about the Revolutionary War. We're trained to think it's about taxes without representation, which was a big deal. But Benjamin Franklin in his diary says the American people would have gladly borne the taxes without representation from Great Britain. It was how's he? I'm gonna have to paraphrase it because I don't want to mess up his quote. But he goes on to say that I'm sorry, Doug distracted me. He goes on to say that the I'm sorry, you're gonna have to
Oh,
remind me what I was saying.
oh no, it's you were speaking about Benjamin Franklin uh, and when Thomas Jefferson saying that why when the currency was changed in the colonies and what the effect it had on pretty much the economy and what it
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so Benjamin Franklin, he says we would have gladly borne the taxes from Great Britain. The sole reason for the Revolutionary War was to gain control of our own money supply back. So when you find out these things and you realize that in your schooling and your history, you're completely missing these huge things that happened in our own history. You're missing that the American people and the government are founding fathers, which the media and government like to say, bring up all the time. Our founding fathers would, without hesitation, pick up their weapons and overthrow this government. That's what our founding fathers would do. They are quite clear about central banks. They're quite clear on corporations. They're quite clear on violating the Constitution. They're quite clear on why they have the right to bear arms. So it's kind of mind-opening when you get into the actual history of America. And again, I challenge anyone out there to actually go look up what I'm talking about and research it for yourself. Do not just listen to me. Don't listen to all the research that I've done. Do it for yourself. Do it for yourself. Verify it. Verify all of these different ag-gag laws. Verify Supreme Court decisions saying that police don't have to protect you. Verify court decisions that say that you have a legal right to resist unlawful arrest. Verify it, because it's gonna be you personally that is affected by it when it comes. So it's better that for yourself, for your own knowledge, instead of saying, well, I heard one guy talk on the internet, or I read a post that said this. Like, no, go look it up. There's plenty of evidence actually out there to look up.
a lot of what you said about our current economic state, especially with banks, and it's why our economy is so tied into China's right now because we sell them a lot of our debt, and we have there's a lot of talk that's getting into deep economic discussions where my background is in more political science, but I have some awareness of all that operates, and it's just especially with how we do the debt, especially with banks and how they can actually borrow money at such a low percentage, while someone making $25,000 a year has an interest rate that is like triple as much, and it's just backwards as how this is supposed to operate. Because again, as I mentioned before, this is getting into the debate the anti-federalists and federalists have had in different formats over hundreds of years. And anti-federalists are more like no, we don't want anything to do with the central bank. The Federalists were more like, well, we think this is a good idea to have everything centrally done together, so we don't have to worry about it as a country. And there's great points on both sides where you can definitely find something in between, because there's different.
Yeah.
There's not just banks out there. There's different forms of places where you can put your money, like credit unions and things like that. So it's not all about just banks, but we're in a place where, again, you can, unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't look into that, or we're definitely not taught that. I went to high school. Again, I'm not trying to bash the South, but I went to high school in the South in North Carolina. There's certain things in history you just don't hear about if you went to high school in the South. This is from after speaking to a lot of individuals who went to high school elsewhere. And it's just like, oh, I researched that on myself, but that definitely didn't come up in the classroom. And it's unfortunate, because education is key in understanding history and understanding why certain things happen. Is important, because basically, as you mentioned, the Great Depression, that was extremely similar to what happened with the housing crisis just 10 years ago. It was banks ran amok. They gave people loans that they probably shouldn't have, with subprime mortgages, and they're basically saying, oh, wait, you can't pay it. We already kind of knew that, but we're going to take your house away. And they want to blame individuals for that. Well, everyone wants to have, the American dream has been for years to own a home and take care of your family, but they immediately took all those houses away and sold them on pennies on the dollar. So these are things that are happening, and there's still those close to the housing market who said it. Because not McCain Feingold, that's I just lost the name of, after Glass-Steagall was repealed, that basically had restricted the banks, so we couldn't have another Great Depression. I believe it was Clinton who actually repealed that. And again, you can look at that, and that's kind of helped lead to the housing crisis. I can't remember what the name of the bill that replaced it off the top of my head right now. But that bill, which Donald Trump actually completely tried to get rid of with his administration and controlling both houses of Congress, that doesn't really do that much. But if you get rid of that, what's to say, again, that's just going to accelerate the process of another type of housing crisis or something else, because banks can do whatever they want without regulation. And the problem is, there's most of the people defending corporations and large banks are individuals who are lower middle class or in the working class, and they're protecting billionaires for psychological reasons that I can't really estimate, because they're literally working against you. Small business owners, corporations work against you. They get these subsidies so they can basically put a thumb on competition and say, no, you're not. You're limited, because we can afford to put you out of business. And so there's a lot of things that people think that they're voting for, but when they're actually, what you're actually doing is they're voting against their own self-interest. And a lot of people get upset when you point that out. But when you look at the facts, if you are, like I said, there are certain things that people do that do vote against their own self-interest, and that's a hard thing to explain to people. I've had, it seems like a lot of these happen on Facebook, but I've been on Facebook. It was like this is not picking on some people that are white working class individuals, and you go through in these threads talking to them like, no, this is actually hurting you, but for whatever reason, is it tied to religion? Is it tied to race? They're like, no, I'm going to vote for this candidate, even though I just listed. Well, actually, they're actually going to hurt you or try to take away your health care, or try to take away all these different things, but they can't see past their own personal biases to realize, wait, these darker individuals or these non-Christians, they're not actually working against me. Like, they're not. It's these corporations who have fooled me into thinking I should vote for the politicians they want me to vote for, so they can have more deregulation. And that started at the airplane bill in, I believe, the early 70s, where they started deregulating the airplane industry. And then we've had massive deregulation and neoliberalism since the 70s that have led us to this. And now it's like basically our generation is the first one basically in droves be like, we need something else. This isn't working.
Yeah.
I have numerous friends who have degrees that if they had these same degrees 30 years ago, they would start off making 60 grand. Some of them are being bartenders. Some of them are waitresses and waiters. And and these are extremely educated people. And we were all told, you go to college, oh, you're going to get this great job and make money. But when basically my age group, we grew up in college is right when this housing crisis happened and the economy tanked. It was horrible. I remember sitting in classes like, well, I'm so glad I'm just getting to college and not just graduating because there were no jobs to be had. Like now, you were screwed if you're graduating college about 8 or 9 years ago. Like, I'm not sure what those people are doing now, but that was a horrible time. And it seems like so many people are afraid to, because older generations, when they hear the word socialist, they're still a little afraid. And they don't want to think about what this economy means or what this would mean if we actually do these policies. But they're also ignorant to the fact, again, like Social Security, the military, Medicare. These are all social programs we already use that are extremely popular that have been effective through decades. So it just seems, what do you think we should or can be done to help inform these individuals who, especially when all these social media outlets, especially Facebook now, have a programmed algorithm that basically say, we're going to hear from, you're only going to get to see news that your friends report, and your friends might be posting up memes that have no fact value whatsoever. Like how in this new age of digital media where we actually have all this information, how do we convince people to go research it and have it there?
Well, I have noticed more and more people who are taking the time to look, but there are still plenty of people who refuse to look at, no matter like how much evidence you present before them. And I've actually spent time to go find all these, like, research different things for someone just to see if they would. And instead, I've heard a quote that in these times, we don't listen to learn. We listen to reply. And that's it. And like when I catch myself doing it all the time, especially on Facebook, when like someone hops on there and calls me a traitor for saying the laws that our country is built on, the founding principles of our nation. And I try to, get them to see like where I'm coming from. And instead they just keep up their propaganda spewing. There's really nothing else you can call it. I mean, our education system is geared to make little obedient factory workers, corporation workers who don't question anything. They accept whatever you're told them. Our history is geared to make patriotic, statist Americans who, have a very big problem for some reason in admitting that their government is doing wrongdoing. And that in of itself is a huge problem. Um, I just watched a video I posted on Facebook by College Humor, and it has an attractive female talking to another attractive female in a bar, and the video is called "How America is Like a Bad Boyfriend." And America comes in a suit and tie, and shows up, and she's like, "Hey, how'd you find me?" And like right off the bat, he's like, "Oh, I was reading your emails and your text messages and listening to your phone calls." And like that's how the entire video is set up. Like, that wouldn't be okay in any other situation. And it goes through how America is, starting fights and always in fights and blah blah blah, and like but it keeps it light. And I mean, you brought up education. This is why I like Thomas Jefferson. He's a very, very educated man himself, and he has a tiny quote: "An educated citizenry is a vital requisite for our survival as a free people." Um, so, like, you absolutely need to educate yourself. I mean, how can I prove to you that education is bad? Well, by the simple fact that we're taught Christopher Columbus discovered North America. You get out of this stupid propaganda education system, and you discover actual history. Right off the bat, you're like, oh, how can I trust anything else I had just learned? Um, and then you have education, like higher education, being so expensive and jobs not being available that people can't pay off their debts, college debts. My brother, um, computer science major, went to college for quite some time, had a job making six figures a year, and it took him a long time to pay off his debt. Not only student debt, but credit card debt that he had to get credit card to cover, like, whatever that he needed, and etc. And like, yeah, it comes into play, money management and those type of skills. Um, but that's not taught in school. Like, I mean, it seems as if like you need to get loans and you need to get money to go to school. Then maybe they should teach you how to manage money.
I
Maybe they
actually
should
have
teach you how to manage interest, etc. Go ahead.
a direct story on that because that uh, definitely affects me. This was hilarious, and the timing. There was no way this timing was done, especially on accident. Especially with now learning that banks and credit card companies are selling information to each other. When I sent in my college application and it was accepted, and it was basically stated that I was definitely going to go to school. Not too much longer after that, I received a pre-approved credit card with like a 1,500 limit in the mail to my parents' house, basically saying like, "Hey, we see that you're going to college. Here's all this money that you have not had the training to spend well. Here you go." I actually that credit card I never even touched, thankfully, because Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's things like that happen all the time, and there are definitely scenarios and problems that I have with public education and public schools, especially now that people are certain states, Texas, for example, is fighting to, it still sounds bizarre to even say this, to put Jesus Christ in textbooks as one of the founding fathers of the country, and it's just like, oh my god,
What?
it's like, and it's just, and stuff, hearing things like that, especially as a journalist, when you research these things, it's like there is no mention of any religion by name in the Constitution. And do you honestly think that was on accident? Now you can debate. There's debates you can have about every single aspect about the Constitution, what it really meant. If should we even listen to original sin, or should we listen to original? But you cannot say that these men sat there and was like, and on accident forgot to mention religion. It specifically mentioned everyone has the right to practice their own religion. That's a freedom of religion. They didn't mention Christianity on purpose. Like this whole debate over like United States of America was found as a Christian nation is like based on what in the Constitution, and that's where it ends and begins. Because on that, you can't say the founding fathers were purposely setting up a theology. Pretty much, that's not the case.
Yeah, that's exactly what that would have been. But our Constitution is quite clear that we have freedom of religion. You know, we have these freedoms because you got to understand that all of those old school ideas, those were part of the old world, right? And people coming to the new world, America, wanted to break away from society. They were tired of being controlled by central banks. They were tired of having their religious freedoms oppressed. They were tired of not being able to speak out against the government. They were tired of having to be told and what to clear if you were in the media and you wanted to report on something. Like we have a lot of freedoms and their inalienable rights given to us by the Creator, and the Constitution protects those rights. And anyone, police officer, military, government, judges, any of that, you have to swear an oath that you will defend the Constitution, because that is the law of the land. I don't know. It's. I talk to people on Facebook. I share some horrible type of legislation that's passed in a state, and people are like, "Well, I'm glad I don't live there." Well, those are Americans, right? Do you care about them? Do you care about your countrymen, country women? Like, do you care about the Constitution? Do you care about your freedoms and rights? Do you care that the Constitution is the law of the land regardless of what state you live in? That's what gives you those rights and freedoms, right? And or doesn't give you, but they're protected by the Constitution. So when a state violates that Constitution, that should affect everyone. That should affect you regardless where you live. You shouldn't be looking at that as, oh, that's a liberal state, or oh, that's a conservative state. Like, yeah, it might be, but that doesn't matter. What matters is we're all under law and controlled by our Constitution. That's how it's supposed to work. So when these gun control laws get passed here in California, a lot of people think like, oh, they're just a bunch of gun-hating liberals out there. Like, no, there are plenty. Texas and California are the two states that put the most personnel into the military, right? So how can you say that the same people who are in Texas fighting for the rights of freedom or free speech and the right to bear arms and religion or any of them aren't the same people in California? Because based on where they live, like that's ridiculous. Like people in Texas, they don't have any more control over their government and their state and the federal government than the people in California do. In fact, I just watched a video that shows in Oceanside, California, I believe, that the people were some private citizens, or I don't know who they were. They were taking the ballot boxes away when they hadn't been counted yet. So people voted, and they took the ballot boxes away to their own private establishments.
That happened in
And who's to say no corruption is going on? That is caught on video, and people are asking them while they're doing it. I shared the video myself. So, I mean, I'll take you back to Athens, Georgia, 1946, the Battle of Athens, Georgia, 1946. That was over exactly that. Them taking the ballot boxes and us not being able to ensure no corruption is going on.
And
so, like, I don't get. Like, we all need to understand, regardless of our color, regardless of our religion, regardless of what political spectrum you're on, whatever your political label, like, we're all being screwed over equally here. And we all have the power to change that just by realizing that we are everything and they are nothing. We're their workers, we're their soldiers, we're their police, we're their means of transport, we're their means of manufacturing, we're their means of money holding, money transfer. We are everything. They need us. So let's start using our power here. Let's start making it very clear. Like, I'll take you back to GMOs, right? I read a poll that asked Americans if they would like GMOs labeled. That poll came back as 90% of Americans wanting GMOs labeled, right? So let's just think about those numbers. 90%. That means the majority of the country, which we rarely agree, right? The majority of the country rarely agrees on something. But the majority of the country agrees that we want GMOs labeled, not outlawed like some countries have actually done, because they've looked into it and said, no, I don't like this, and you're not bringing this into our freaking country. We just wanted them labeled, but our government did the exact opposite. They passed what we're calling the Dark Food Act, which literally tells corporations they don't have to label GMOs. So that's in complete opposition to us, the people. So they don't obviously have our consent to do that, and they did it.
Yeah.
And yet there is no action on our part. Like, this is the thing. Like, I mean, we can get as mad as we want to at governments and corporations, but if we're just going to sit here and bitch about the problems and not actually try to solve anything, then we're the ones who are going to die. We're the ones who are going to be in those wars. We're the ones who are going to not have water. People at the top, I guarantee you, they'll have water. Okay? So at what point are you going to say, you know what, it doesn't matter, my income no longer matters? I mean, I talked to surgeons and doctors out at Standing Rock who gave up 6-figure a year jobs and have just pretty much moved to Standing Rock to continue to help. I mean, that's crazy, but that's what's needed. I mean, if you want to stay back and make sure your family is taken care of, I cannot fault you for that, and no one should try to fault you for that. But to try to say that, I don't know, to be that person who has enough money for your friends and your family and your needs, and to have enough to be saving, etc. We all know the economy is going to crash. We know that. They keep passing a certain legislation that pushes the deadline a little bit further back, a little bit further back. But we know it's coming. We know that if we continue these fracking and fossil fuel pipelines everywhere, that we're going to be poisoning our own water supply. We know that Monsanto in specific has come out with plants that have insecticide built into their DNA, so they won't have to spray crops, which has led to super insects, which are resistant to most insecticides. So not only did you create a stronger life form that might end up biting you in the ass, but you put insecticide into food and are selling it, and you're not legally obligated to say, yo, we genetically modified this corn or this plant that you're eating to have insecticide in it. No mention. You don't have to do that. There are chemicals, plenty of chemicals that are put into everyday items, our clothes, our construction materials, our couches, anything and everything, that they don't have to go through any type of proving process, testing process to see what kind of effects they may have on our health or well-being. What is BPA and water bottles? They had been putting that in there for years until someone decided to test it and found out, oh, it actually, causes all of these health problems, and hence that's why we now have BPA-free water bottles. But like, that's what I'm saying. There's no type of testing or trial period for these chemicals. They can just throw them into whatever and not inform anyone,
And
not
that's
do any testing. And like, the amount of things these corporations are getting away with is disgusting. I mean, it is literally putting not only our lives, but anyone's lives on the line who are getting these materials. My wife, while I was in Standing Rock, she went to a discount store trying to find some clothes to send out there and help support the movement. And she said she came across a hat, a cold weather hat that had the California, what is it, Proposition 64 warning or whatever, that says like this product contains chemicals that's known to the state of California to cause cancer. And then it even had another warning like, don't put this on your skin or something. And you're wearing it on your head. It's a hat. Like, the amount of, for lack of a better word, bullshit they're getting away with is mind-blowing. And you follow it up to like, we're the ones being affected and we're not doing anything about it. Like, that's why this revolution like needs to be a mind shift. You need to change your perspective. Like, we can accomplish everything we need to accomplish without without all of these negatives. So yeah, I'll let you speak because I've been speaking for a while.
oh yeah. You make a lot of great points, and I mean, yeah, I've listened to a doctor's debate that in some cases GMOs are great, in other cases you get things like pesticides, and yeah, voting on and labeling them as GMOs is perfectly acceptable and fine. I'm not sure what's the big deal. Just companies can then take extra step and say, yes, this is a GMO, but it's not what you think it is. And I mean, yeah, that's fine. You have nothing to hide. You have nothing to hide. That's perfectly fine. And I always find you brought up issues of guns and those laws. The very first journalistic article I ever published was on guns, and I got attacked from both sides on it because I don't have an extremist view at all. And I just find it funny because people expect when they hear about the issue of guns that, okay, we have a stereotype. If you are on either side of the country, we have a stereotype of what you look like and what you are and how you vote. And I think it's hilarious because I was at Standing Rock, so thousands of veterans, like basically me, thousands of veterans on the camp, me being a journalist, and you hear people talking, there's like, yeah, you guys are kind of all at most center left-ish, and it's like, you all love guns, and people think that you can't be on the left at all and love gun and care about guns, and that to me is, I know tons of people who are on the left is like, yeah, I like shooting guns, but I would like universal background checks. I would like people who are known for violence or people who beat their wives and this kind of stuff. Yeah, I would like them to not be able to get them, but it doesn't mean I want to ban all weapons. And yeah, I always take a look at it. It's like, yeah, there's things we can do to prevent all these ridiculous gun deaths. But when you say that, there's a lot of people on the opposite side, like, oh, you hate all guns. You want people never to have guns. You don't care about it. I was like, I'm not even going to get into that argument, because if you actually read what I have actually published, that's not the case. I mean, there are countries that have done that have, again, yeah, you see drastic decrease of gun deaths, like almost to none, but they don't have a Second Amendment, I'm not in the camp of let's just try to pass an amendment to abolish the second. It's like, no, we don't have to do that. I mean, there's things you can do for safety reasons and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, I just always find that debate funny. It's like, oh no, if you must be one or the other when it comes to a debate about guns, and people screaming at each other. And that also brings up a point, well, that about this whole talk about I'll you about traders and everything that you support Standing Rock and you serve in the Marines and how people and I will admit for anyone listening, I did comment on a post on Seth's thread about someone who called him a traitor, and I was not exactly soft in what I said to that individual. So yeah, I have seen and witnessed it, and I have responded in a certain manner. I will put that out there to be honest with you, anyone listening. But when
Yeah.
people say that to you and on threads, and then they back it up by saying because you went to Standing Rock and you give them, there already was a long list of reasons why you went to Standing Rock. What can you explain, like what how that directly feels? Where do you feel that mindset is coming from, and why? And just how do you typically respond to that? And has anyone actually ever said that to you in person?
Okay. Well, first, how does it make me feel? Pretty upset. I mean, especially when they claim to be fellow Marines, which a few of them have. They've claimed to be fellow Marines. I mean, when someone does take that approach, I usually look at their profile and see no mention in their work history that they were in the Marine Corps. And then usually I follow up. Well, first with that, the Marines are the few, the proud. The Marines. Uh, I know I don't know of any Marine who is not proud of taking that oath. They may not be proud of things they like ended up doing in the service and then getting back and realizing like, oh, we went to war based on a giant lie. We went to war so these corporations can make more money. We went to war so a central bank can seize power there. Oh, and you come back from that and you find out like, oh, it was all propaganda that they were pushing. They had no connections to 9/11 or anything else. Um, so that's my first approach when I come across those people. As far as how do you talk to that person, I don't know. I've talked to actual Marines that I can verify, and they're not taking the "you're a traitor" to your oath or anything else. Um, sit down, you big monster. Um, you're not a traitor to your oath. But they may not agree with a protest or this or this, and they may be saying, uh, what do they say? The protesters are being violent, and therefore they're domestic enemies, etc., etc. Um, but you can look at video. You can see a peaceful protest then get stopped from marching because of police. I've talked to people who are in charge of planning protests, and personally witnessed the police when the protest is coming up to a blockade. They reroute the protest to go up another street, and the police are actively setting up the blockades and blocking them in. Um, that is a violation of our constitutional right to protest. That is a violation of our constitutional right to assemble. That is a violation of our constitutional right to travel unmolested in this country. So, especially if they're Marines, look up Smedley Butler. I mean, Smedley Butler is we're taught about him in boot camp. Smedley Butler has some very powerful quotes very powerful quotes. He says the U.S. military should only be used for the defense of one's home and defending the Bill of Rights. That's it. So he also goes into a much longer quote, which he says, "I served as every rank in the commission ranks of the U.S. Marine Corps. I personally led invasions of different countries." He even then goes into specific details on saying which country he invaded, and then realized after he invaded it that it was for a bank, for a corporation. That's why the American military is being used, to seize the rights of other countries, to seize power for these people who care about nothing but power. You know, Smedley Butler. I would encourage you to look him up.
He's the same general who pretty much avoided the coup, correct?
Avoided the what?
The coup?
The coup.
After World War II, or I'm thinking of someone else.
Which coup are you talking about?
After the war, or during the war against FDR. Because I might be thinking.
Oh, see, I don't even know. You might know something that I don't.
I believe that's Smedley Butler, because I remember him reading that he. Again, no one quote me on that. I'm going to check that right after this, but I believe Smedley Butler. He testified that there were individuals planning a coup against FDR. I can't remember the exact reason, but I do remember that name. And he wasn't believed at first, and it was found out that everything he said was 100% accurate. And he was asked to partake in it, and he was like, "Why would I? No, like that's ridiculous." and he testified about it, and yeah, because I definitely remember that name. But that's
his actual quote there is, "I served in all commissioned ranks of a second lieutenant to a major general. And during that time, I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business and Wall Street and for the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer for capitalism."
that's definitely a powerful statement. And so you've never came across any of these individuals who call you a traitor to your face or anything? It's those who actually approach you or actually want to talk about the issue and Standing Rock more?
I have not had, I don't know whether to say the pleasure or misfortune of running into someone who actually, wants to discuss it face to face. In fact, because that veterans post out in North Dakota was saying all that towards veterans, threatening the use of violence towards veterans coming out to Standing Rock peacefully. If I ever make it back out there, I do want to grab some vets and head over there and have a talk, because I have no idea where they're getting their ideas from. I mean, if you look at our laws and you look at all these different court rulings about police, how we have the actual right to defend yourself from unlawful arrest. In fact, I'll read. This is upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States. This is Plummer versus the State, 136, IND 306. This premise was upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States in the case of John Bad Elk versus the U.S. 177 U.S. 529. Okay, the ruling that they upheld is citizens may resist unlawful arrest to the point of taking an arresting officer's life if necessary. The court stated, where the officer is killed in the course of the disorder which naturally accompanies an attempted arrest that is resisted. You want to lay down? Lay down? Come on. There you go. When the officer is killed in the course of the disorder which naturally accompanies an attempted arrest that is resisted, the law looks with very different eyes upon the transaction, when the officer had the right to make the arrest from what it does if the officer had no right. What may be murder in the first case might be nothing more than manslaughter in the other, or the facts show that no arrest has been committed. So you are allowed to defend yourself and others when it comes to police wrongfully arresting or needlessly beating someone on the ground or using, police just unnecessary force. That reminds me. Earlier in the interview, you were mentioning what officers are not legally allowed to do when it comes to like arresting someone when they're on the ground. They're legally, not supposed to keep beating them when they're not providing an actual threat upon the officers' lives. I on Facebook, I was talking to that retired police officer, and he linked me an oath of police officers, and I read it. And he also linked me escalating force that police are trained and are authorized to use. In that escalating force, it talks about using pepper spray or tear gas. And it makes it very clear that you're not allowed to use tear gas or pepper spray or any of that unless if it's to assist in making an arrest. Now, go look at Standing Rock video of the people standing in the river with signs, right? And they're walking up and down the line spraying them. They're not arresting them, right? They are using chemical weapons unlawfully. So I don't get how anyone can see that amount of force being used. Okay, like, speaking personal experience now, going out there with the vets for Standing Rock, we came across information. Now, it may have been misinformation by these infiltrators or what have you, but we came across information that they planted explosives on the bridge that they blockaded. So when the vets come to approach the barrier, they can blow them up and try and make it look like the vets did it. Ever since I've left, I've been in constant contact with the camp on the ground. I even had the pleasure of phoning Wes Clark in the middle of the night because of one of these threats we received. North Dakota is the only state in the U.S. that has legalized the use of weaponized drones. And we got word that they were planning on using drones to deliver explosives to different areas of either the camp or on their own work site and make it look like we're committing violence. Now, they have an insurance policy that directly states if they can prove that this protest has become a riot, then the insurance payment will pretty much negate all of their costs of building the pipeline thus far. So everything they've done will be for free, including all of these fines that they're facing every single day for still being out there. Since the camp was going on, while I was there, they were flying aircraft above us, which is already a federal no-fly zone, but they were flying without lights on. So we had a real hard time trying to take pictures or video or anything. There have been pictures of the planes being flown over to have the same gear that crop dusters use. Plenty of reports from camp have come out that they are spraying some type of thing over the people, over the camp. Right after one of those spraying events, pretty much everyone in camp came down with what's known as camp cough or dapple cough, which for myself personally, it was standing pneumonia. For my younger brother who came out there with me, he got like actual pneumonia. He got 104-degree fever, was like horribly dehydrated, had to be actually they had to get an ambulance to transport him to the hospital. All this stuff. He didn't have insurance, right? So by the time I finally hear about it, I get out to freaking Bismarck Hospital and trying to figure out where my brother is. Everyone at camp, all the surgeons, all the doctors, all the EMT, all of them told me he would be hospitalized. There's no way, like, because I asked him, I was like, he doesn't have insurance, so, like, I know legally they're not allowed to kick him out, but, you know, he's a young guy. He might just sign things because he doesn't realize, like, what the hell he's doing. I don't know. Finally get out there to Bismarck in the middle of the night, walk into the ER, and they tell me they released him. And I got pretty upset. I was like, okay, well, I don't see him here in the waiting room. He has pneumonia. He couldn't breathe. He was horribly dehydrated. So are you telling me you just kicked someone who is desperately sick and all these other medical opinions said he needs to be hospitalized? Is that what you're telling me right now? She was like, well, no, he was fine. We treated him and he's fine. I was like, no one gets over pneumonia in one day. So what are you talking about? And they started calling the security of the hospital and stuff. Like, I was like, okay. Had to walk out of there. I came across a hospital security guard outside and asked him, I was like, dude, what kind of show are you running at this hospital? Like, my little brother was brought here for, you know, all of these things, and they're telling me they released him. Every other medical person I talked to said he wasn't going to be released. So where the hell is my brother at? Do y'all have another waiting room he could be at? Like, you understand this is like sub-zero temperatures out here, and you potentially just put someone back on the street who needs to be hospitalized. And he was like, well, we have a main lobby waiting room. And I was like, okay, how do I get to it? He told me walk around the block, and thankfully my brother was in there. But that ER waiting lady, she wouldn't even tell me that they had another lobby to check for my brother. She was like, well, he came into ER and you don't see him here. Like, all this attitude. And I was like, dude, are you serious? Are you serious right now? My brother's life is in danger because of possibly your negligence, and you're giving me attitude? Like, yeah, so as far as back to your actual question, I'm personally trying to not be so quick to anger, to actually be able to talk some sense into people. But it's really hard to know if you're just wasting time with that person. Maybe that person is actually, you know, a paid person to be online and to spread freaking BS, which we know is a thing now. Or maybe it's just a really misguided person. I don't really know. But as far as to speak to them, like, I have a hard time, especially when the person is continuously saying just wrong information, saying completely wrong information about protesters being terrorists. Like, how is a protester a terrorist? You as a citizen have the right to protest. So are you saying someone using their constitutionally protected right is a terrorist in this country? Because if that's what you're saying, and now there's legislation trying to be pushed, trying to label protesters as economic terrorists, with a minimum of 5 years in prison. No. No, there's no, you're allowed to boycott companies. You're allowed to protest companies. Like all of these things, we need to start recognizing, like, okay, these are huge issues. Like back to Hitler, like, how did they get their own countrymen to persecute their own countrymen? With the media, with spreading lies, with pushing constant BS. So we need to be just as active in speaking truth and pushing knowledge. And then we need to step up and we need to help. We need to donate our time or supplies, money, whatever you can. Simply spreading awareness, finding those people, sharing different articles on Facebook, you know, getting the news out there that these are horrible problems that need to be stopped. Every day I'm getting updates from camp of infiltrators who are trying to bring in all types of things into camp, which you agreed you would not do. We all agreed when you arrive there, you agree to the rules. No drugs, no alcohol, no weapons. So when these infiltrators are bringing in drugs or bringing in weapons or spreading false news, like, they're breaking what they agreed to do on camp. So now the problem is, like, latest I've talked to, we have at least 7 confirmed Tiger Swan personnel who are posing as veterans in the camp. I talked to someone else who said they have, I mean, names, social security cards, credit cards, their vehicle license plates, like all of their information. And same with Blackwater. I've heard now Blackwater personnel are same thing, posing as veterans, and they could be veterans. I mean, I know plenty of military people go into those things, but that's what I'm saying. Like, no matter which side you're on, if we all come to the simple realization that you need water to survive, regardless of anything else, then it seems that we all need to be protecting that water. We need to make sure that our literal lifeline is protected. That a corporation and fracking policies aren't idiotic to the point where they're just burying these chemicals back into the ground and letting them tear through the earth and leak into the water reservoirs. Like, none of that makes sense to me. And then to find out, like, Halliburton has a loophole. It's called the Halliburton loophole in legal terms. And that's pretty much, if you're fracking and you cause irreversible damage to the environment, you can't be charged with anything. So at that point, when there are laws that say, hey, even if you're, you know, killing all of these people and destroying all of this stuff, like, you have no legal recourse. You have no legal punishment. You have nothing to, you know, dissuade you from doing this for profit. Then why the hell wouldn't they do it for profit? That's all they care about, right? So it seems that it's up to the American people, it's up to the people of the world to personally look at this and say, enough is enough. Germany is almost 100% self-efficient green energy, an entire country. And it's one of the biggest, like, industrial zones. They manufacture a lot of shit there. They're a primary, primary economy in the world's workings. And they have constantly pushed for more and more and more factories to be shut down, nuclear power plants, what have you, light of green energy. Wind, if you actually research wind energy, if we focused on wind energy, we could generate 4 times the amount of power that the U.S. is using currently, just from wind. That's not solar. That's not tidal. That's not wave generate or yeah, waves are geothermic, all of which are legitimate energy producing things and do exist. And then if you do look into wind, the big bladed windmills that we all see, like those are good because they're using wind, but they're also killing a lot of birds a year. I didn't realize that. This is what I learned from arguing with someone who was for fossil fuels. He said, like, you understand that wind generation is killing like over 60,000 birds a year. And I was like, what? And I looked into it, and it's true. It's completely true. Does that mean we need to stop wind? No. The wind energy research is already further on than the big bladed windmills. Now they have what look like giant radio antennas, and they simply vibrate from the wind, and that vibration gives them the energy. They have fully enclosed that look like box fans, with very little moving parts on both of these, which means repairs simple, maintenance simple. You're not spending like any type of crazy maintenance for pipelines, which we're failing to do, which is obvious. I mean, just looking at how many pipeline ruptures and problems just in this last year in 2016, they're over 100. Over 100. I think it's actually over 200 pipeline accidents in just 1 year.
It was over 220 major accidents in 2016.
Yeah, and these pipelines aren't being well maintained. That's what that should tell you. So the idea that we should build more simply because we have them and better technology, like, no. You want to use that better technology, okay, put a shutoff valve, like simple type of things. Put a shutoff valve, replace the pipe with the newer pipe, maintain that pipe, right? Like, that's a simple solution. That doesn't mean you have to build more and more pipelines. We're supposed to be moving away from fossil fuels. So why would you try to build more in, like, it's just crazy. I mean, when you look at the railroad explosion, a lot of companies went under because they were building way too many railroads, and now we have a lot of rail lines that aren't even utilized because of that. And they were doing that because of money. They were getting paid from the government to lay track and et cetera. So I don't know, like the whole idea, especially in America, like, we seem to be really tied on to the fact that our country, our nation, is incapable of wrong. And that's a horrible mindset to have about anything. No one is incapable of wrong. There should be plenty of signs that point to that this country is being led by corporations, banks. These people only care about profits. They're using our military and therefore our very lives in order to do this. Like, I don't know. We've got to do something different, and we have all the power. So it seems to me that we need to start acting. We know how to lay pipe. We're the ones who laid the pipe, right? So tear the pipe out, put in new pipe. Flint, Michigan now has clean water. Like, I don't understand why we've known about this problem for so long. Why is it not fixed? It is a simple fix.
Yeah, it's definitely it's frustrating to see all these things and see not more Americans seeing. In certain cases, at Standing Rock, you see people from different countries. Like I met a guy from Scotland, or Yeah, Scotland. He was, and I heard his accent. And I was like, "You're from the UK, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just flew here from Scotland." I was like, "You just spent probably 2 grand flying here when there's some Americans literally 20 miles away who think everyone here deserves to die." Like some of when you hear stuff
Yeah.
like that, it's really it makes you think like, are some people so misinformed, brainwashed, or really that big of bigots that they don't care, or is it something that we can fix? I honestly think it's something that can be fixed, because again, especially with the new generation, because I'm not the older part of millennials, but for the most part, but what I've seen and heard from younger millennials, like, yeah, they actually is like, why do I care what someone religion? I don't care if I don't care if someone what race they're like. Can we just fix things and that's good, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's I just so it's hard to sometimes comprehend what exactly is going on. And before we close up, is there anything else you wanted to touch on really quick?
Um, I mean, I guess I would just reiterate, like, I mean, we hear all these problems, and they are problems, and we have a tendency to feel hopeless or outraged or, any of these big emotions. And the thing to remember is, like, we're the people. We put this government in charge. They, in order to remain in power, they have to have our consent. Um, we have the right to alter and abolish this government if they do not start defending our lives. And I don't know of a better way to say that than that. I mean, water is life. I challenge any of you who is against this protest to just stop drinking water. See how long you last. I guarantee it's not going to go very long. You need water. Every living thing on this planet needs water. So we're the ones who can stop this. We're the ones who can literally change everything. And we need to stop relying on these governments and corporations to fix our problems for us. Like, it should be quite apparent that that's not going to happen. That we need to actually step up. We need to defend our rights and defend each other, for not only ourselves and our family and our friends, but other people. Like, we need to start caring about what happens to other Americans. I mean, like, the amount of indifference and complacency in this nation is crazy. We need to actually start doing something with our actions. Actions speak louder than words. So, instead of just bitching and bitching and bitching about, your government or these different corporations, like, maybe we should start acting. Maybe we should start making these changes ourselves. Um, Future of Standing Rock. A lot of people think Standing Rock is over. The future of Standing Rock, we are literally going to build a self-sustaining city from scratch. That is the plan. So everyone in camp knows we're going to have to move because of spring and possible flooding. But we have plenty of plans to actually show the world and America, especially America, that, look, if you want to build a city from scratch, all it takes is like-minded individuals, people feeding us money, supplies to get it done. And we can do this together. You're tired of seeing these things? Then let's get it done. Period. I guarantee you start writing your congressman and telling them, if you do not support this, if you do not start pushing for donations to fix your own state's water supply, you're done. Period. This is what the people want. This is what we need. We know that water is life, and we know that drinking water with any of these chemicals or lead or anything else in it is unhealthy. And you, by the government are supposed to be guarding our lives. So if you're failing to do that because a corporation is pouring money into you, you're a traitor. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You are choosing a company, a corporation, monetary gain over your own countrymen, over your own constitution, which you swore you would defend. You swore you would not let that be violated. So, it's up to us. It's really up to us to keep spreading knowledge, to keep acting as much as possible. I mean, I know people who are at Standing Rock who still have their jobs and they make big commutes to work 4 days, 5 days a week, and then drive all the way out there to be there on the weekend and help out, and drive all the way back. And they been doing this for over a month now, and probably even longer. I don't know how long they've been there. But those are the things we need to start realizing. We have plenty of people who are looking for jobs. We have plenty of people who have more than enough money from their jobs or from the entertainment business or from whatever position they have. Let's start using our money. Let's start using our work and ethics to, affect our own country and our own lives for the better. Why are we constantly letting these companies, corporations, and government just walk all over us, walk all over our rights, especially when we swore we would not let that happen? So I guess that's it in closing.
And that's definitely a great point. And again, this conversation has been great, and I'm sure hear a lot of things. And if people want to do a live Q&A, I'm definitely willing to do that in the future. And again, it was great speaking to you, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Yeah, brother. Thanks. I mean, I look forward to speaking to you again, or anyone else who needs to talk about things. So thanks for having me, man.
Oh, no problem at all.